Hey everybody, Charles for HumbleMechanic.com. Today, I'm taking your questions on power steering racks, burning oil, and getting speeding tickets. This is episode 116 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. So in order to get a question on a show like this, email me, charles@humblemechanic.com, and put question for Charles in the subject. That's what I use to filter out these emails. Also, if you can, do me a favor, put the question right at the top, then space down a little bit and give me the details, give me the information. That'll help you ask the question faster. That'll help me read the question faster. Might even be able to sneak a couple more questions in on every show. All right, before we get into the show, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is Rain Eater wiper blades. Look, having good quality wiper blades is incredibly important on your vehicle. Also, with winter coming up, it's going to be even more important. Winter is generally the harshest time of the year for wiper blades. They're also an incredibly easy DIY that anybody can do. So, if you want an awesome quality wiper blade at a great price, check out Rain Eater wiper blades at raineater.com. All right, let's get into the questions. First one comes from Steve. I have a question about my electronic power steering rack on my 2015 Golf. On my first road trip in my new car, I made a stop for lunch, and when I returned, I was greeted with warning lights and 2 error messages on the dash. I had a TPMS and an ESC light. So we had a tire pressure monitor light and an electronic stability control light. After a quick check of the tire pressures and a visual inspection around and under the car, I decided to try and drive around the parking lot. I made it about 75 feet and both warning lights went out. I took the car to the dealership. They called the Volkswagen tech line. Volkswagen tech line wasn't sure what was wrong, so they recommended replacing the power steering rack. Seems strange to me to need such repair after only 1,000 miles, but better now than after my warranty expires. My car is an early 2015 build, and my question is, are you seeing a lot of failures around the Mk7 steering systems? Steve, awesome question. We're really not seeing that many failures on the Mk7 steering racks. We actually have had one GTI that needed a power steering rack. To be honest, I don't remember exactly what the parameters are. From what I remember, it was probably something a lot like what you had. There are sensors inside of that power steering rack that if they fail, the only repair really is to replace the power steering rack. Especially when you're under warranty, and really when you're at that low a mileage, we wouldn't want to run the risk and put a reman unit in it. We'd want to make sure we got a new part from Volkswagen. And yeah, Volkswagen does generally ask for parts back when they're replaced under warranty. That way they can do their own analysis. They can take them apart. They can do, the failed parts videos like I do and see what's going on and whether or not they need to change software, whether or not they need to find a new manufacturer, whether or not they need to start investigating a retrofit piece or something like that, or some kind of parts update. So like I said, we haven't seen many. There has been one, not a common enough thing to really worry about. I've actually seen a lot more of the not electric power steering racks fail due to leaking out of the seals right where the tie rod comes out. I've seen a bunch of those on the Jettas and on the Passats, but the newer generation power steering racks have really been pretty good. Oh, I will say though, one of the most common reasons for us to replace those power steering racks is actually impact. Even a seemingly minor impact can damage the internal electronics of these power steering racks. So great question, Steve. I hope that that one little repair is all you have to worry about, at least for a while on your Golf. All right, next one comes from Clay. I have an 01 Golf with a 2.0. It's burning a lot of oil for the past 2 years and steadily getting worse. I have to add about 1 quart every 1,000 miles, otherwise the light comes on going around corners. Gas mileage also decreased by 75 miles per tank when the weather is cold. Last year I replaced the thermostat, the temp sensor, cleaned the airflow meter, and recently replaced the spark plugs and wires. I've been told it could be the PCV valve, piston rings, or head gasket. Nobody seems to know what they're talking about. If you have any insight, I would greatly appreciate it. Clay, so you got oil consumption, or maybe we need to make sure that we're not leaking this engine oil first. The 2 liters weren't the most leaking engine on the in the Volkswagen fleet, but they could develop leaks from the valve cover gasket, the oil pan, the oil filter housing, the oil filter. Basically anywhere there's an oil seal has the potential to leak. But the valve cover, the oil pan, the oil cooler, the oil filter, the drain plug, the PCV valve like you mentioned, those are all the most common things for oil leaks. Step 1, we need to make sure we're not leaking oil. Step 2, we need to make sure we're using the right oil. Using the wrong oil can lead to adverse effects, so make sure we're using what the owner's book says on your 01 Golf. And 3, and when we're worried about oil consumption, generally, especially on this engine, I usually lean towards the piston rings. It is probably the most common source of oil consumption on a lot of our cars, but on the non-turbo cars, piston rings are generally what the problem is. I wouldn't really think it's a head gasket issue. I've only seen a couple of Volkswagens have bad head gaskets. Although it's possible, I wouldn't really think that that's the case. But here's the thing, if you're gonna re-ring your engine, you're putting a new head gasket on it anyway, so if it was a problem, it won't be after you re-ring the engine. Also understand that using 1 quart of oil in 1,000 miles is actually considered normal. When we do oil consumption tests under warranty at the dealership, what we do is we fill it with a certain amount, we have the customer drive a certain amount of miles, we bring it back, we drain the oil, and then we weigh it. We take that weight and we enter it into a formula, and basically what happens is the scan tool tells us, yes, this is good, no, you need further diagnostic. And using 1 quart in 1,000 miles does fall in the normal range. Now, do you feel like that's too much oil? Probably. Do I feel like that's too much oil? I sure do. So what can we do before we completely disassemble our engine and put new piston rings in it? There's a product from BG called CPR, Compression Performance Restorer. And what you do is you put this in the crankcase, you run it for 10 minutes or something like that before you do the oil change. Make sure you're following the instructions on the bottle. Don't go by what I just said, because that was me just trying to remember how I did it. But this product worked great on my Passat. I was using a little less than 1 quart per like 1,500 miles. It drastically reduced the amount of oil consumption. I did a compression test before using this product. Then I did a compression test after using this product. I saw about a 6% increase in overall compression across the 4 cylinders. So doing the compression test on top of not putting as much oil in between oil changes says to me that, hey, this stuff works. You may have to do it twice. I don't really know. I've done it a couple of times. It's to the point now where I do it every other time before I change the oil in my Passat. So next time I do an oil change on the Passat, I'll actually use this product and shoot some video for you guys to check it out. So I would look at a product like that. I think the BG thing works great. It's stupid cheap. It's like $5 or $6 or $7. It's under 10 bucks. It's worth a try. Even if it doesn't work, you're only out a couple bucks, but I personally saw good results by using this product. So check for leaks, try the compression restorer. If that doesn't work, odds are you're probably gonna need to re-ring your engine. All right, next one comes from Peter. Says, Charles, today I got a speeding ticket on my motorcycle. It reminded me of a time when I got pulled over in a customer's car for expired tags. Luckily, the officer let me go. So the question is, have you ever been pulled over in a customer's car? And if so, please tell us the story. Bonus points if you tell the story of getting pulled over in a personal car for something really dumb. Well, Peter, to be honest with you, for the most part, I feel like anytime I've ever been pulled over, it has been really dumb. Not that I was doing something dumb, just the fact that I got pulled over was dumb. I have never been pulled over in a customer's car, but I have been pulled over at work before. Back when I used to work at CarMax, a customer and I were on a test drive, and the customer was driving, and I was just kind of chilling out in the passenger seat, spacing out. I'm really terrible with riding with customers. I'm a bad passenger in a car, so I tend to just space out. But anyway, this lady was going probably 15 over. The officer pulled up behind her. Like a knucklehead, I jumped out of the car, but the officer was very cool about it. Yeah, I had a dealer tag on the car, so he let us go. Thankfully, she didn't get a ticket. Of course, I had to report that when I got back, but it was stressful at the time, but not a big deal. I did have another time where a guy was driving a manual transmission and rolled back into the car behind him. I don't think he noticed when he did it, because when the light turned green, he just went, and I didn't say anything right or wrong. I don't know. I was like 19 at the time, so I was kind of an idiot, but nothing ever really came of that. The time that I got pulled over for the dumbest thing is kind of a funny story. My wife and I were going to brunch on a Sunday morning or something. This is back when we lived in Illinois, and flying down the highway, going 10 or 15 over, no big deal. It was Sunday morning, early, very little traffic. And my radar detector started beeping. And me, being the smart aleck that I am, I was like, oh, honey, don't worry. It beeps here every time, because it did. That's the same route I went to work every day, and it beeped at that same spot. Well, apparently the police officer knew that that's what happened, because just as we crested the top of the hill, I saw him with his gun, and he sure got me, and he was more than happy to give me a speeding ticket on a bright, beautiful Sunday morning. But, I was speeding. He was cool about it. That's probably the dumbest time that I've got pulled over. And I've gotten pulled over, a handful of times. One for not doing a 4 count at a stop sign by an officer. And him and I did not have a good experience that time. Another funny one, we bought a new car and my wife was driving it. And when they did the transfer of the tags, they messed it up. So she was actually driving a car that had plates that weren't even registered to the car that she was driving. So Luckily, it was her that got pulled over and not me, because I probably would have got put in jail for that. No, luckily, I worked at the dealership at the time, and my buddy Jack got it straightened out, considering he was the one that messed it up in the first place. Luckily, I still work with Jack, and it's fun to give him a hard time every now and then about it. So, awesome question, and this is gonna be the question of the day. What's the funniest, stupidest, dumbest reason that you have ever been pulled over? All right, next one comes from Navarre. Hey brother, fellow VW tech here. What's your opinion on water injection in relation to being able to keep the intake side of the valves clean on newer direct injection Audi and Volkswagen engines? I have a 2011 GTI APR with a K04 turbo with 123,000 miles, and she's still going strong. The theory is there. It should do something to keep some of that off the backs of the valves. Will it be the end-all, save-all, be-all for that issue? Probably not. A lot of it's going to depend on how it's injected. Is it injected, right past the throttle body where you just have to kind of spray it into the intake manifold? Or is there an injector on each port of the intake manifold? An injector on each port of the intake manifold is going to probably do a better job than one single injector to keep the carbon off the backs of the valves. But remember that these systems are more performance-based systems. These are enthusiast-type systems. This is not a system that we are going to put in every production car out there, because now it's one more thing that needs maintenance. It's one more thing that someone's going to have to top off the water. BMW is putting this in the M4 GTS, which is a whole nother ballgame than a 2015 Jetta. So, not really comparable apples to apples, but I think it would do some to keep some of that carbon off. I don't think it's going to do everything and take it from being a severe issue and a problem to nobody ever having to worry about it again. All right, next one comes from Victor. I just bought a 2014 Tiguan and would like to know the difference between the GTI and would like to know the difference between the GTI 2.0T and the Tiguan 2.0T. GTI has more horsepower and torque. Do you know if this is a software or hardware that makes the extra power? One other question, do you know how to eliminate the horn beep when locking the car? It drives me nuts. All right, let's talk about the GTI versus the Tiguan. It's software. On that generation, it's software, it's software, it's software. You can get a tune for your Tiguan from Unitronic. I'm assuming APR makes a tune as well. They're pretty reliable tunes. These companies do a good job of R&D and testing before it ever gets to market. I actually considered getting my Tiguan tuned, but because it's a lease, I'm probably not going to. Although I have heard good things about the tunes on the Tiguans. I did a whole show about whether or not it would void any kind of warranty. Victor, I'll put a link in the video notes for you to check that out. There are some consequences to doing things like that to your warranty. It all really depends on the situation and what the modification is. So please watch that video. That'll go way more in depth and hopefully give you all the information that you want on that front. As far as the beep, or the ATA confirm as it's called on your Tiguan, I shot a quick video especially for you with my phone, and you know what, let's just go ahead and watch that now. Victor had sent me a question and asked how to turn the beep off when he locks his 2014 Tiguan. We're going to be using the steering wheel controls, and we're going to get to the settings menu. We're going to go down to convenience, and we're going to unselect ATA confirm. ATA confirm is the honk when you lock the doors of your car. Victor, if your car doesn't have this selection on it, it's going to have to be something programmed with a scan tool. But give it a shot and it'll probably be in there. So there you go, Victor. I hope both of those answers helped you. Next one comes from Len. I have an 01 Golf 5-speed. This is the second 01 Golf question. With a 2-liter engine, I believe it's bone stock, I would like to add an oil pressure gauge and found an interesting adapter that sits between the oil filter and the engine. Have you ever used one, and or would you recommend using one of these? Len sent me a picture of a New South Performance oil pressure gauge fitting. You see it here. It looks like it fits somewhere near the oil cooler. Len, I have not used that particular one. I have installed one oil pressure gauge on my Mitsubishi that I used to have, and all I did was take the oil pressure switch out, make a little T-fitting, put the switch in one side, and put the adapter for the hose that went up to the gauge on the other side. It was really easy. It took me about 10 minutes and cost me, I don't know, 10 bucks or something like that. It did leak a tiny little bit, and this is a way nicer looking setup. So if money wasn't an issue, I would absolutely go this route. It does look like a nice product, well built, and it's obviously meant to fit on your car. So again, if money's not a problem, I'd go with that one. All right, this one comes from Tihan. Man, I hope I said your name right. I have a reoccurring issue when my handbrake sticks after depressing the lever. Usually once I let off, you can hear the pad click off the rotor. However, today, 25 degrees Fahrenheit morning, My inner pad on my right rear rotor remained in place and scorched the inner rotor surface. The inner pad only seems to disengage on warm days or when the rotor has been warmed or hot on a cold day. Does this seem to be a piston issue or something wrong with the parking brake mechanism? So really cool question. Obviously I don't know. It could be either one. Let's figure out how to find out which one it is. The first thing I would do is take the parking brake cable off. I would take it off just that one caliper, and then I would take the car on a quick drive. Be extremely careful whenever you disengage any type of brake component. I know it's just the parking brake cable, but you gotta be careful when working in this space. So take the parking brake cable off, drive it, put your car up in the air, or at least that one wheel, and spin the wheel and see if it's hung. If it's hung, it's probably not the parking brake cable. You can also get under it and look. When you take that cable off, does the arm stay retracted or not? If the arm stays retracted or stays pulled forward like it would when the cable does, try and get a screwdriver and pop it back, or a little, small hammer and tap it back. Don't beat it up real bad. You just want to try and move it back to the landing portion of the parking brake cable. And then spin the wheel, see what happens. This is all trying to eliminate either one component or the other. If you take the parking brake cable off, the little arm sets back on the landing, no problem, and you still can't pull the wheel after a few brake presses, it's probably the caliper. If when you take the parking brake cable off, it works fine and you don't have a problem, it's probably something in the cable. You also want to look at the sheathing of that cable and see what it looks like. Is it all bunched up in one spot? If it's all bunched up, then it's probably a cable issue, or we need to get the cable fixed before we can properly evaluate the overall condition of the rear brake system. So this is going to take a little work, it's going to take a little diagnostic, but just remember thinking of separating the two systems and testing them. Again, I can't say this enough, anytime you are working with the brake system, disabling things or doing diagnostic on it, please to everyone, please be extremely careful with what you're doing. I don't want to see anyone trying to do something and have a catastrophic brake failure and result in an accident or someone getting hurt. All right, got time for one more. This one comes from Sean. It says, Charles, I love the show and the great information that you give, but I feel it may be a bit negative. I'm looking to purchase my next vehicle and have become hesitant on VWs. I'm mostly interested in a diesel, but may purchase a gas model. But with all the talk of high pressure pumps, turbo failures, transmission failures, I'm becoming a bit hesitant. I understand you don't want to be a propaganda puppet of VW, but I could use some reassurance. Thank you for your input. And I couldn't care less about Dieselgate. Sean, thanks for not caring about Dieselgate. I'm tired of it. We still get questions all the time. It's still in the news. Europe, I guess, has some kind of pipe that they're going to be installing that changes the way air flows across the airflow meter, as well as an update. It's on the 1.6 diesel. We don't have that in the US. I'm putting it over here until I start to get official word from Volkswagen about what the repairs are going to be. As far as me being negative, I could see how a lot of people would think that. I mean, look, we just talked about failed parts. We talk about broken things all the time. I've got a ton of really quick videos of, hey, look at this failed. Hey, look at this failed. Hey, look at this failed. I get it. I get it because we're talking about a lot of the negative things that happen in the Volkswagen world. But understand, and I've said it before, anybody could do any of these videos on any car line. All cars break. Heck, a lot of cars share parts from all the same manufacturer. Bosch has parts in every car. TRW has parts in a lot of cars. So it doesn't really matter that I'm doing these videos. It doesn't change anything with Volkswagen. There's a ton of places you can do a lot of research on, initial quality with JD Power, which is skewed in ways, cars.com, edmunds.com, you name it. There's tons of sites out there that you can do a lot of research on to find out whether this car is going to be a good car for you on paper. But we really don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with this car until we drive this car. My B5 Passat has had a few issues, but compared to other B5 Passats, this thing is a champ and it has nothing wrong with it. I've seen cars with failures at 60 miles. I've seen cars go 100,000 miles and have like a bad gas cap. So it really all depends on the vehicle. It depends on how it's maintained. It depends on how it's driven and how much it's driven. The cars driven more seem to have less problems. But these are just facts. Again, anybody could do these kind of videos or do failed parts videos on any car line out there. In fact, this is why I started to do these failed parts videos, is because look, this is a common failure. This is something you want to know about. This may be a common failure, but not be that big of a deal. Or this could be a common failure and your engine could explode. If you drive with the water pump bad for too long, that's going to cause catastrophic engine damage. So to kind of put it this way, I own 4 Volkswagens. I love each and every one of them in a different way. I have owned many other Volkswagens in my life, and some of them have been good, some of them haven't been as good. Another thing to remember is, we on the internet like to talk about the things that are negative. There are very few people that go to a forum to say, hey, I've never had a problem with my car. Everything about it's been great. Or you get one of those for every 100 people saying, this car's a piece of junk. I've had so many problems with it. And we need to look at what those problems are. Does so many problems mean that the check engine light came on once under warranty and they brought it in 3 other times for service? Or does the so many problems mean they had it at the shop for 3 weeks because they couldn't fix it? Now, is that a car problem or a shop problem? There's so many layers to all of this that you can't just say across the board, this car is great, this car is crap. Or nobody has a problem when they buy a Toyota, everybody has a problem when they buy an Audi. Toyota has a service department too. Toyota fixes cars, Toyota's brake, Honda's brake, Kia's brake, Ford's brake, Chevy's brake, Porsche's brake, even though they're always at the highest level on the JD Power, Mazda's brake. Every car on the road will break at some point. Do some break more than others? Absolutely. Is Volkswagen towards the bottom on the IQS thing from JD Power? They sure are. But that doesn't mean that a Volkswagen isn't the right car for you. So buy what you like, especially if you lease it. Buy what you think you're gonna love, and if you don't like it, there's the keys back. Hand it back to them when you're done and move on to something else. But really invest the time, really invest the effort into researching, driving all these cars. Don't just take a 5-minute test drive and decide you wanna buy the car. Try and, if you can take the car overnight, try and do that. If you can go on multiple test drives, do that. Remember, we're spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on these cars that are going to be worth very, very, very much less than the price that you pay them very quickly. So do the research, and if you end up with something that you don't like, it stinks, but I think we've all been there, and you just don't ever buy that kind of car again. So Sean, awesome question. Thank you very much. Thanks to everybody else for sending in such great questions. Again, if you want to get a question on a show like this, email me, charles@humblemechanic.com, and put question for Charles in the subject. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments about today's show, post it in the comment section below, and be nice in the comment section. Hey, if you like the video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube. I always appreciate that. You can also subscribe on YouTube or on the blog at humblemechanic.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the blog, and obviously right here on YouTube. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. No beer of the day again. Still water.